विश्व में हमने युवाओं की IT एनर्जी के माध्यम से अपना एक रुतबा खड़ा किया है और भारत इसके बात के लिए गर्व कर सकता है। दुनिया में हम आंख में आंख मिला करके बात कर सकते हैं और ये मेरा साफ मैं हमेशा कहता आया हूँ, IT plus IT is equal to IT. Information technology plus Indian talent is equal to India tomorrow.
Hi, very good afternoon. सभी को नमस्कार. A warm welcome on 18th World Education Summit School Education on the first day of 10th March. And here we are live on the 11:30 a.m. session on the topic Emerging Trends in School Education, Aligning Them with 21st Century Skills. So to discuss on this particular topic, we have esteemed panelists and the key decision makers from the school education. And I would like to welcome all the esteemed panelists of this session. So I would like to introduce our speaker for this session. I would like to welcome the speaker and the moderator of this session, Dr. Amrita Vohra, Director Education, GEMS Education India. Welcome, Amrita ma'am. Welcome to the 18th World Education Summit. And thank you for giving your precious time. And I would like to welcome Mr. Stephen Cox, Chief Education Officer, New Nordic School from Finland. Welcome, Stephen. Welcome to the 18th World Education Summit. And Stephen is live from the Dubai right now. And I would like to welcome Mr. Abhimanyu Basu, Dean of Academics, Dhirubhai Ambani International School from Mumbai. Welcome, Abhimanyu sir. बहुत-बहुत धन्यवाद sir 18th World Education Summit को समय देने के लिए. I would like to welcome Mr. Brian Cooklin, Managing Director, Nordic Anglia Education. Welcome, Brian. Welcome to the 18th World Education Summit. Thank you for giving your precious time to us and enlightening us for this precious summit. And I would like to welcome Mr. Raghav Podar, the Chairman of Podar Education Group. Welcome, Raghav sir. Welcome to the 18th World Education Summit. So we are looking forward for the wonderful and the most enlightened session. And I will hand over this session to Mr. Amrita Aurora. So I request all my audience, if you have any question, please put your question in the Q&A section. We will take it live. And otherwise, you can also follow your social handles of our speakers. And I will hand over this session to Dr. Amrita. Amrita ma'am, over to you. Stage is all yours.
Thank you, Abhishek. And the topic for our session is emerging trends in school education, aligning them with 21st century skills. So when we talk about 21st century skills, in this scenario, when we've just been through a whole year, which has been like a watershed moment in the history of, I don't know how many things, but definitely education in particular, a lot has changed in many ways. Changing at an unfathomable speed. How are we genuinely being able to, as schools, prepare children sufficiently for the life ahead? Prepare children sufficiently or equip them to face the challenges that they will be facing in near future. I think that's what we are going to discuss today in a major way. As schools, we've been working on that. There have been endless discussions. 21st century skills. We are already 20 years and more into the century. So it's no longer something that we should still be thinking about only. It should be all up and about and already ongoing in all our schools. And I think the last year has given us a whole lot of new tools and techniques and opened our eyes to a whole new world, as it were, in many schools. The schools that were not really following technology in or blended learning or hybrid models have also come up, and we've seen a lot of changes. We've seen a lot of openness and a lot of acceptance also emerging for the idea of change as such. Now, critical thinking, creativity, also important now, building resilience, all of these things have come together. So before I start with any of the questions, I would request each panelist to share their thoughts, their views, initial views in a couple of minutes, and then we can move on to some questions specific to specific ideas and specific topics. So maybe we start with you, Mr. Raghav.
Sure. Thank you, Amrita. Thank you so much. And thank you to the Elets team to have me here. It's my pleasure always to be at your summits. Namaste to all the viewers watching. The education system of the entire world, the way education is delivered to students, is at the cusp of a dimensional shift. The way curriculum was transacted up until now has been disrupted by the pandemic, and we have to ensure it's for the better. The way this pandemic hit us, there's no doubt in anyone's mind that digital transformation has changed the way education is being delivered in classrooms across the world. More importantly, though, is the purpose aligned with the way these trends are emerging? In this hot pursuit of the latest in virtual learning environments and AR, VR, AI, and other digital transformations, have we missed the woods for the trees? Now, it's not a question of if, but when. At least some of these technologies will become mainstream in schooling across the globe, even after this pandemic is over, even after we get back into the new normal. And what is that new normal going to be? Everyone talks about it being hybrid or blended or phygital. What is phygital? The mix, the confluence of physical and digital. But the fundamental question lies is in, are we serving the purpose of education? Getting our children with the 21st century skills. And yes, it's about the nomenclature, 21st century skills. Perhaps we should not be calling it that anymore because we're 21 years into it already. Maybe let's call it future ready skills. But I think that's more a nomenclature thing. So are we really getting our children ready for these 21st century skills, or are we just finding fancier ways of lesson delivery through e-pedagogues? There is no better time than a crisis that forces us to grow and wakes us up from the slumber of rudimentary pedagogy. We can ill afford another education system that tests students in and prepares students for skills that they won't even require in their 21st century lifetimes. This is a time of transition where the trends are still forming, where they're still evolving. And it is incumbent upon us, especially the education thought leaders, the influencers, to steer this evolution of education in the direction which will truly benefit our students the most. Our posterity will look back at this time as one of those defining moments that comes once in centuries. And they're going to either thank us for the direction in which we took education, or they're going to curse us for not rising up to the occasion when we had the opportunity. We are preparing children for jobs that don't exist yet. They're going to be solving problems that we don't even know are problems yet by using technologies that haven't even been invented yet. So the uncertainty is so fascinating. We're preparing them for lives 20, 30, 40 years from now when we don't know what the next 2 or 3 years are going to look like. So with that uncertainty, we need to ensure we equip them with the life skills that will allow them to tackle any of life's challenges head on, rather than just prepare them for a test that perhaps measures their ability to memorize and regurgitate better.
Thank you, Mr. Podar. In fact, very correctly put. The future generation, the posterity is really going to either curse us or bless us, because really this is a watershed moment and it's a disruption like never before, and a lot is yet to be decided. We don't know what are we preparing them for. So that's really true. Thank you. With that, maybe move to Mr. Brian Cooklin. Would you like to share, sir?
Certainly. Thank you, Dr. Amrita, and thank you for this opportunity, and good day to everyone. In the first instance, I think we spend too much time, I agree with Raghav, about labels. Let's forget about labels. The label 21st century skills was useful at the beginning because what it did was to shift thinking. It was to get people to think differently. I just think it's important to teach children and give them the opportunity to develop the right skills. So whatever those skills are, let's just call them skills. That's the first point. Secondly, what this has taught us, well, there are some skills that have been developed during this pandemic, whether we liked it or not. Across the board, people have had to be much more adaptable, much more agile. Schools have had to adapt to this new situation. So have children, so have families. It's been a huge shift. And it's been very interesting to see around the world what people are taking out of this, because it is different in different places. In some places, people have stopped building the schools they were planning and are deciding to do something completely different with the space. And they're looking at it as more of a learning hub than a traditional school. Other countries are looking at, do we need exams at all? But of course, that's a big change, and each country has to look at how ready they are for that, because so many exams have had to depend on teacher judgments, and it's a different situation from what people are used to. So we have major challenges, and are we going to face up to them, or are we going to slip back into the rut of the way we've done things before? Now, all of the people you have on this panel, and you have taking part in the summit, are beacons of light in India. They're all giving examples of how things could be different from the norm or the way things have been done. But it very much depends on the culture of the society. You know, Vygotsky said that the intellectual capability of each individual was shaped by the cultural development in their society. That was about social consciousness and the part it plays in your development. And he coined the phrase of a zone of proximal development. And what he meant by that is that your intelligence is developed depending on the institution and how you're treated. So a school and how a learner is treated. Have we learnt the lessons to be student-centered, to listen to student voice, to develop student interests, to go with their interests and take us to the future? That, I think, is a challenge we need to face.
Thank you, Mr. Cooklin. And very correctly put, do we really listen to student voice amidst all of this? While this watershed moment when I think for the very first time education or our classrooms genuinely transcended space and time, we all have learned a lot. We all have adapted a lot. But are we still giving due emphasis to student choice and student voice in our classrooms, in our system? I think it all needs to be relooked at, and we need to get beyond the labels, very correctly put. Maybe move on to Mr. Stephen Cox. Finland is a country which we all have been talking about in education since years and years now. And we all have something to learn, definitely. Yes, the same model cannot be adapted exactly everywhere else, of course. Again, adapting is required to local requirements, but there's a lot to learn for sure. So we'll be happy to learn, sir. Over to you.
Thank you, Doctor, and thank you, Elets, for allowing me the opportunity to join this panel, and looking forward to the discussion. So briefly, a little bit on my thoughts and about me and what I'm doing, really. So my name's Stephen Cox. I'm the Chief Education Officer for New Nordic School, which is based in Espoo in Finland, just outside of Helsinki, although I'm based here in Dubai in the UAE, where I've been for the last sort of 14 years. And we are developing an education system born out of, I think, what all panelists would agree, that current systems of education are outdated, based on mass production, standardized. And I think it's kind of that, and during this very difficult period that we've all been and still going through, that it's really brought out those inadequacies around curriculum, around the use of technology, and as you said, I think, Doctor, that it is time for change, and we're at the cusp of that change, and somebody's got to do it, and it's going to take a collective movement of people and educators and influencers who are going to be the catalyst for that change, and we would like to be part of that. And we've already begun that journey some time ago in terms of developing what we believe, I think, Raghav, you said future ready, and I concur with the panel in terms of these 21st century skills. It's like saying 21st century schools. By definition, every school is 21st century because it's now 2021. And ultimately, the 21st century skills were brought in 2002 based on kind of 4 competencies or 7 skills or what have you. So we've kind of moved on somewhat. And so I also think that in terms of where we are in education, and Thorne has recently written a report about this 10 years on, that we seem to be focusing on the wrong drivers in education. We have this very strong focus on an academics obsession, and which we now need to move into much more a kind of well-being and learning agenda, which focuses on those core skills and competencies that enable students to then learn how to learn or get them through their journey in order to promote those lifelong learning skills. In Finland, I think, as just been mentioned, there's the reason why Finland has been so successful in its education system has been a cultural society thing, and the level of empowerment right the way from the top, right the way back into the classroom. And I think there is obviously very difficult to export a whole country and a culture around that, but you can, in as far as I'm aware, build that within one environment. You can build that culture within one environment, whether that's within your own school, group of schools, or what have you, and that gives the momentum then for a country to maybe look at doing things in a different way. So we're currently working in India, and we have around sort of 7-8 projects on the go. We're working with Raghav at Podar as well, which we were honoured to do initially, and really want to be a catalyst for this change in agenda and really focusing on the right drivers now, which is really empowering students to give purpose to them, for them to be able to go on and do something that actually is lifelong and actually will make a difference.
Thank you, Mr. Stephen. I think you brought up some very, very key ideas here. We need to move away from education being what Taylor Gatto called weapons of mass instruction, so that moving away from that is so much needed. And you brought out that we're training them with skills which help them learn how to learn, more of metacognition, more of probing, more of inquiry, rather than obsession with academic, pure academics or rote and regurgitating facts, etc. One very, very key idea that you brought out is to do how this does need a sort of culture shift. And all stakeholders, the entire society, not just the school or the little microcosm of the school, but the entire culture shift is very, very key. And I think in a big way, it is happening, and we are all trying to make that happen. I think in a big way, we also as education leaders have the responsibility to steer ahead this kind of culture shift, and it's wonderful. With that, over to you, Mr. Abhimanyu Basu. I'm sure you have a lot to add, although it's always tough to be the last one on the line. We have covered most of the key ideas. So you're on mute.
Yes. The last year provided a lot of opportunities in propagating 21st century skills, and I will first bring in technology in terms of how technology actually aided that. Collaboration, one of the key factors we have seen far more actively happening on the various virtual platforms. Sometimes, we did notice that when we did collaborate earlier, on a sort of offline mode, you would not see people participating. But now these sort of breakout rooms and a virtual platform is actually helping the ones who are quiet, who do not actually express themselves, sometimes to sort of contribute more. But if you really want to look at the top 21st century skills, because I think someone put it very aptly that most of these kids will have multiple careers in their life where they can learn certain things, but the attitudes and the attributes are important. So my question to schools would be that we can't just say that we are doing 21st century skills, right? We need to break it down for them. We need to see how we are achieving that at each class level. And it's very easy to say, very difficult to do, because these are all larger attributes. These are, as as Stephen and Brian said rightly, it's about the way that you learn, which is so important. So like the IT to a certain extent has its way of the ATL skills, which is the approaches of teaching or approaches of learning. Similarly, if we can look at what our school vision or school mission is, how we want to propagate these 21st century skills, and then break that down on a way that it can be then tracked in terms of how the children are acquiring those sort of skill sets, how that's brought into the lessons by the teachers, how that's, and sort of a way, because these are things which are not very easy to measure, but at the end of the day, you need to see some propagation of this across the schools. So any of these things happening in the schools, I think it's very, very important that there is a sort of approach through which you break that down across the school, within the class levels, and have certain expectations that you would make them move through it. I feel technology is going to play a very vital role in putting all of these things together, and we have seen that over the last 1 year, at least in terms of how it has aided some of the schools and many of them to actually figure out that which are some good practices that we can put up. And as Raghav, you rightly said that as we move forward, things come back to normal, we will be having an overlap period where you would be having some schools in school, some children in school, and some children at home. So technology is going to leverage a large way in terms of how we get back students into schools, and not only that, but also then help how we can break this whole aspect down and take that forward and see that it actually happens. Because having large vision statements is no good unless it can be broken down into that class section teacher level. A larger buyout for all stakeholders in terms of how the institution wants to move, and then for everyone to understand what they want to achieve is the way to move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Abhimanyu. And you very correctly pointed out that collaboration has phenomenally actually increased, and not just collaboration as we know it, it's also not just collaboration, it is virtual collaboration that has increased. I mean, within just my school, I saw over 146 student exchange programs happening. And yes, you correctly pointed out there are so many children who may not be speaking well enough in a real-time classroom, but will be speaking very, very well, and they come out. So a lot of personalized learning has also become possible. A lot more tools are more handy for teachers. Taking it forward from there, and over to you, Mr. Podar. Yes, you use the term, yes, hybrid, blended, or digital, a combination of physical and digital. Amidst all of this, while all the schools are planning, what are the kind of key areas of integration or that you are looking at? How do you plan to really balance? Because there are certain advantages and certain disadvantages of technology, and there are certain similarly advantages and disadvantages of the physical space. So what kind of balance and approaches to balance are you looking at? Maybe you can elaborate.
Absolutely, and that's a wonderful question, and I'm going to set some context before I actually answer it. So schools across the world were stuck to their archaic content, being delivered in even more outdated ways. 21st century citizens being taught by 20th century educators in 19th century learning spaces. The education system was conceived in the 19th century for a time when people were basically being trained to be put into farms or factories. So what was the role of the person who was getting into a factory? To be a peg in an assembly line. Now with automation technology and now the Industrial Revolution 4.0, we don't need humans to be second-class robots, but instead be first-class humans. Now, what are the traits that are inherent to humans that no technology can replace or do a better job of? And what is the role of the educator in such times? Is it just of being an information delivery boy or a content delivery lady? You know, when we were growing up, we had teachers who would stand on the stage and blurt out these pearls of wisdom, and we would catch on onto those pearls of wisdom. The role of the educators moved from being that sage on the stage to a guide on the side, from being that security guard, gatekeeper of knowledge, to basically being a coach, a mentor, and a facilitator of learning. Today's children already have Google on their fingertips, and with that access to limitless information, by the time they grow up, they are going to be auto-prompted with AI and other technologies for the information that they require to complete their next task. So the entire education system needs, which is currently very anachronistic, needs to be brought up to speed, up to the times. Technology, we know, can easily deliver content, but it's only a human teacher that can inspire, encourage, and spark that imagination, inquiry, and curiosity inside a child. So the balance is extremely key. Yes, technology is very important, but technology is only important as an enabler. The role of education, the fundamental crux of good education, is the basis of a human relationship, which no technology can replace or do a better job of. So it's the relationship between a teacher and a learner that needs to be focused on, and use technology to further supplement that and enhance that.
So correctly pointed out. Nothing whatsoever can replace the connection, that relationship that happens between the teacher and the learner. And I think it's not just the physical teacher, the facilitator. There are also the children, the relationship with the peer group, the relationship overall between the parent, teacher, student, and the entire community, the culture overall. These are way more important than anything that pure technology can provide. So definitely we need to keep that in mind, which brings us to the second element again here. The pandemic meant a lot of isolation, social distancing, etc. But what it also meant was a parallel pandemic of social isolation. What has really come to the forefront during this time is the importance of social emotional learning. Mr. Brian Cooklin, I just want you to emphasize a little more on how, as schools, as educators, we can really work on, or consciously work on, the social emotional intelligences of children, their resilience quotient, and so on during, within the education scenario now.
Thank you. It's a question very much at the heart of the subject, and one that I feel strongly about, because the point I was making in the first contribution about social consciousness is part and parcel of this. What we're doing in schools is treating children as individuals. I agree 100% with everything that Raghav said, particularly in terms of the relationships, because we're not working in a traditional office environment, a traditional factory environment. What we have is a human dynamic, and every day moods change, ideas change. What someone could learn yesterday or teach yesterday doesn't work today. And the reason we make it work is because human beings, in this case teachers, have the radar, have the sensitivity, have the empathy to understand the changing situation and to adapt what they're doing to suit the child's needs. Now, how you do this in the classroom setting varies, but the personalized learning is a big part of it. If a child can see that they are making the progress that they're capable of, it's a tremendous boost to their self-confidence, and self-confidence is the key to success. Now, we talked earlier about agility and adaptability in the pandemic, but resilience is also growing because people have had to deal with adversity and difficulty, either personally in their families, within their communities, within their countries. And it's made life very different for them to cope with. And while everyone has spoken, understandably, about the growth in mental health problems, what we need to also pick up is the growth in resilience, the capacity for people to do well. So I'm very, very humbled by the huge upsurge from young people to help others, not just others in their class, in their school, but in their community. So even though they were isolated, they were organizing, fundraising, or donating materials, food to people who had nothing. So the social and emotional learning isn't just a lesson that we deliver in class. It's a way of life, and our schools do it remarkably well across the world. And they do it because they understand that human focus and the need for human beings to collaborate. So, for example, in our particular group of schools, I've seen the benefit of the development of the collaboration with the Juilliard School in terms of dance, of drama, of music, because these are different languages that speak across the world and don't require an understanding of the particular language of a country. And equally, the collaboration with MIT and the STEAM challenges crosses over subjects. And this is about giving children opportunities to solve real life problems. This is what builds their resilience and builds their confidence. And this is the best antidote to the loneliness, the difficulty of being stuck in this current situation. And you do it by building the bonds within the family as well. Having competitions that involve the whole family. We've done it with bake-offs, with dance competitions, with sport competitions, with build a castle out of any materials in your house. Doesn't matter what it is. What you can see as a result is not just the learning, but you can see the bonding. So these are the critical aspects of social and emotional learning that we have to develop on a day and daily basis, whether it's with peer learning or teacher-assisted learning. It's about focusing on the child and what's best for their development.
Thank you so much, Mr. Brian Cooklin, and it's genuinely really needed that we start working on these competencies. Taking it forward from there, Mr. Stephen, Mr. Brian has really pointed out a lot of things or factors in this direction, but I would like you to look at, while we work with social emotional development of children and bringing in, real life circumstances and scenarios which really help them build all these. We're also, as you earlier pointed out, working on helping them learn how to learn, or building what I'd say a growth mindset. What all can we do to really ensure the children, take that step or ownership of their own learning and genuinely are able to build that life skill, of very critical life skill in today's time of learning how to learn?
Yeah, very good question, and very interesting to hear panel's discussion, particularly around social isolation. It seems that the pandemic has kind of started to dehumanize us all as we sort of operate from our silos a little bit. It's interesting to see even here in the UAE that people are now preferring to live out in the sort of out of the main city area and on their own, in their own sort of areas, and that may continue. It'll be interesting to see how things evolve, and education has kind of gone that way a little bit as well. But ultimately, in terms of answering your question, I think it's about, again, going back to the right drivers. So, if I look at outstanding schools that I've worked in previously for companies that I've worked in, for example, they kind of have been taken an outdated curriculum, ripped it apart, and they're delivering a very good standard of education for their young students, which has all the elements that we're talking about today. But wouldn't it be better if we actually crossed a new paradigm and developed that curriculum from a start, in a sense. That's a curriculum that actually had all of the global competencies that we want young people to learn, a curriculum that was lifelong learning, that actually encouraged students to learn how to learn, and I'll come on to that in a second, that was inclusive, that focused on all the right drivers, and obviously was affordable. So I think that's kind of the new paradigm that I think education shift we need to be looking to do. And I think for us at New Nordic School, we're trying to build a curriculum that really focuses on that. But in terms of real life connections, one of the things that we have in our curriculum is a strong focus on UN Sustainability Development Goals. So this notion that actually you empower students to actually decide on their own education journey, in a sense, of choosing something, a problem in society that they want to solve, and ultimately working on that in collaboration through interdisciplinary units that we call quests. So not traditional sort of subjects per se, but working with other students. So building up those skills of collaboration, resilience, leadership that we've been talking about. But at the same time, they're doing something that drives their passion, that gives them purpose in life. So they don't necessarily solve, poverty, sustainability, etc., but they learn how to learn doing something that's driving their passion. And I think if you can attach purpose to learning, it's much more evident in terms of the impact of that leading to lifelong learning. It's just like, for example, if I wanted to lose some weight and I set that off in January because I've maybe eaten too much over the Christmas period, that's a purpose, that's a motivator, that's a driver. But if I wanted to do a marathon, I might actually carry on that for longer and stay healthy and stay fit. There's more purpose there. But let's say if I wanted to actually stay alive and stay well for my family, the purpose is more intrinsic. So if we can actually tap into students' purpose, I think that will actually lead to them finding their way in terms of what they want to learn, and ultimately this lifelong learning and learning to learn skills.
Thank you so much, Stephen. That was indeed really, really enlightening. And I'm sure we can take back a lot of practices from this into our real-time classrooms. Now, I have a very interesting question for you, Mr. Abhimanyu. We all know we are here, let's forget about the labels, but we are here talking about future-ready skills. And I think thinking critically and creatively, or creative intelligence or creativity, is very, very important. Ages ago now, Sir Ken Robinson pointed out that very clearly in his very popular TED Talk, where he said that, are we killing creativity as students grow? And if we go by what Picasso says, and I often like to quote that, is every child is a born artist. The problem is to remain one as we grow. And I think as schools, when we put in those weapons of we create assembly lines, that's not possible. But yes, we've realized that it's important. And as schools, I'm sure we're all doing a lot of things to work on critical and creative intelligences of children. What would you like to say on this aspect, Mr. Basu?
Thank you for your question, Amrita. I feel it's all again an attitude. Schools, can have, as I said, large things up on their statements. We can have curriculums which can define things, but if you're not going to let the children come out of the comfort zone, create that sort of environment where they can make a mistake and learn from their mistake, if you do not give them that freedom, because creativity doesn't happen when you're going to bind them with that sort of a structure. How much are schools ready to give the students that freedom? We are all talking about indirectly about student agency. I'm seeing some questions here as well, where people are saying that, how much should students actually decide, in terms of within the frameworks of the curricular frameworks that we have inside the classroom, there can be creative freedom, which can generate people to explore themselves, which can generate them to explore their thoughts. So, creativity can come in if you give everyone in that school or an institution an attitude that it's okay, go and explore yourself, go and express yourself. Doesn't matter if you make a mistake, but it's more important how you learn from it and you take that forward. It's all an attitude. And all of those will promote creativity. And let's understand one thing in the larger scheme of things, that it is those creative people who are going to create employment for the future. It's not going to be the ones who are going to be, ticking all the boxes and moving forward. They will be part of the employment scheme, but the ones who are thinking out of the box. Now, I think the responsibility of schools are how you create an environment to nurture that sort of creativity in the classroom. Do we allow teachers to go outside the box and to express themselves if they want to do something differently? So, again, I think here, as Raghav said, that technology can sort of be an enabler, but it is the difference. It is the differentiated approach by the teachers, because we are all unique. And as teachers, we are all unique. And I feel teaching is one of the most creative jobs, right? So when you talk about bringing in robots in the classroom, I think you kill the creativity. It's like then going back to 1960s, right? Why do we need to go back to that sort of same structure and do that, right? So number one, give every teacher the freedom and creativity to express themselves within the curricular framework that you have. Let children have that expression. Number two is to go and make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. And how do we have a culture in an institution to then define the larger 21st century skills, to break that down within those classrooms, to see that how we are progressing on that. If we can do that well, we are going to be promoting, India will be generating employment in the future. We are not going to be just, doing stuff for others. I think we'll create stuff, we'll be paradigm changes. And I think that's all in the line of what the vision is with the NEP and everything else coming in. Because I think we need to move on version 2.0, right? We need to change the approaches, and those changes need to come right from the kindergarten upwards.
Thank you so much, Mr. Basu. I think very correctly pointed out a lot of points that you mentioned, a lot of factors. Some key ones I'll take here is we do need a no failure paradigm created in the school environment. Everything again boils down to culture, because it's not just this kind of a paradigm needed for children, but also for teachers, which you very correctly pointed out as well. Another very key fact that which you pointed out is that every child is unique, and are we really being able to reach out to their unique learning needs? And each one, as they grow and develop, are they being supported well enough? And yes, we are talking about student agency. And someone here, Dr. Subhash Nair here, has put in a question: do children have a say in what kind of education they need? Which also aligns with this, that every child is special, every child is unique. In this time and age, how are we really looking at inclusion? Mr. Podar, quickly, if you could say a few words on this.
Sure. So you asked, what is the purpose of education? And its most fundamental sense, the purpose of education is simply learning. Why should parents send their children to schools? So that they can maximize their inherent potential, excel at what they are best in, at what they want to do. However, unfortunately in Asia, not only India, all around Asia and maybe other parts of the world also, when you ask parents, so you find out the true reason why do parents send their children to school? So that they can get into the best college. What do you need to get into the best college? The best marks. because college is looked at like the next step towards achieving success in life. So if you get into one of the top prestigious elite colleges, then that is going to be your passport to success in life, the perceived passport to success in life. Sundar Pichai at an interview at IIT Kharagpur said that getting into one of the top colleges is not a necessary prerequisite to success in life. So first of all, we need to recalibrate what the education system is running behind, what the pursuit is on. You mentioned something about no failure paradigm in continuation to what Abhimanyu was saying. And I'll tell you, at our schools, we don't say no failure. We say that the failure is an important stepping stone to success. So the meaning of failure is different. It's important to fail. It's important to stub your toe. It's important to fall and then learn how to get up. And that is what's going to truly develop a growth mindset rather than a no failure approach, which is more a fixed mindset kind of thinking that believes that, oh, I failed because I didn't study well. No, it's good. It's absolutely fine to fail. Everyone's going to fail at some point of time in their life. The idea is, do you know how to get up, brush yourself up, and keep walking towards your goal?
Yeah, so very correctly pointed out, Raghav. No failure paradigm doesn't exactly mean that we will not have failure. No one learns even to walk without endless failures. But the no failure paradigm would essentially mean that, like a child, each time they fall while trying to walk, they're not worried about it. There's no stigma attached to it. There is no, it is just natural. And you keep trying and you keep getting better at it.
This is purely a culture thing. It's a school culture thing that if you can build that school culture, which is pervasive across not only between teachers and students or between principal and students, it's even the culture between how a child talks to a didi or a bhaiya when they enter the school. Do they wish them good morning? Do they treat them with the kind of respect that they deserve? These are cultural things which is developed in a school, which can't be touch felt. It's only felt. Can't be seen like that. So these are vibes which need to be developed.
That's so true. And every time I think with each speaker, each question, we keep coming back to the central idea of culture and how important each stakeholder, and as Raghav put it, the vibe that you eventually get in the school is. Right from the security guard where you enter the school, everything becomes so evident, right? So that is where we are. One of the very key aspects of a school or key stakeholder are the parents. So, Mr. Brian, I would like to ask you, parent engagement being a very key factor, and when we talk about creating this paradigm of growth mindset where no stigma of any sort is attached to the idea of making mistakes, of falling. And in fact, mistakes do genuinely become a stepping stone. Or this obsession of marks that many speakers have spoken about is just out of the window, and we're able to see beyond it. I think parents play a huge role in this whole thing, and many schools do face this as a key challenge, that aligning parents with this thought process is central. So how do you, if you could share some ideas on that?
Yes, I think you're right. It's a critical point, but what inhibits schools and what makes it difficult is actually operating under I'm going to call it the yoke or the tyranny of summative assessment. And this is an obsession that many parents have, as Raghav rightly pointed out, about colleges and universities. And you have to look at these inhibitors and barriers to success in terms of a child's learning. If we can move away from the notion that the only thing that counts is 45 points in the IB, or getting full marks in the stats test, or getting top grades in any exam, if we can move away from that, and the only way we can do it is if we break that link, I think. And this is an opportunity to do something about it just now. Because if we still have universities saying the only way you're going to get in, or top colleges saying the only way you're going to get in is with this mark, we'll always have this driver. So what we do instead, all of us, is that we are trying to shoehorn the freedom, the capacity, the development of a child into this system. It's the point the colleague, Mr. Basu, was saying about working within the curriculum framework. So we can have freedom up to a point. So what we do then in our own ways is to educate parents about what we're offering. And I used to say to parents as a principal, you know, if you want your child to come here, age 5, and get 2 hours at home on every night, repeating the same sums, don't send them here. Because when asked what was the admission criteria, my answer was, are you on the same page as us? Do you share the same values? Do you have the same attitude? If you don't, I advise you to choose another school. And the reason for that is we can only achieve what we do for children if we're doing it in partnership. If we're seeing something in the school that goes counter to what parents says at home, it doesn't work, and vice versa. But the added difficulty you have working in schools is, unfortunately, everyone is an expert about schools, especially parents. Because the first line is, I know about schools, I've been to one. Now, you don't walk into a doctor's surgery and say, I think I can advise you how to treat me as a doctor. You do walk into a school and say, well, I think you should be teaching my child differently because I've got a tutor or I've joined this online group and I think such and such. So a lot of time has to be spent with parents in engagement, in communication. And I think the key is always hands-on. You know, we run a series of model classrooms before they start, saying this is what the classroom's going to be like. Here's a demo of what your child's going to be doing. And we now want you to try it. Here's the project they would get. Now you're going to do it. Here is a project for the whole family. Here is something you're going to be involved in school. And by doing that and running constant workshops explaining why we teach the way we teach, you get a lot more buy-in. It doesn't change the fact, though, at the end of the line, you know, you have this engagement from parents in early years and primary much more than you do in secondary. The engagement in secondary is, are they going to get into X university or college? Can you guarantee? You know, I remember one parent who used to come to me every day in the first week school opened. Mr. Cooklin, can you guarantee that my son's Mandarin will be a high enough standard to get into Taipei University? Her son was age 5. What is the point of putting that stress and pressure on a child from that age? That again is indicative of the wrong attitude as far as I'm concerned. Because if you develop the child holistically, giving them opportunities to succeed right across the board in any subject, in every activity, in every extracurricular club or residential experience, the child develops to such an extent, they have the necessary skills, know-how and ability to get the grade they need anyway. It doesn't need the rote learning, the repetition, the tutoring. It doesn't need any of that. But all of that needs to be explained constantly and repeatedly for parents to get the message.
Thank you, Brian. And I think I'm going to remember that term, the yoke or the tyranny of summative assessment, because yes, everything boils down from assessment and trickles back. And then yes, like someone here, Mr. Krishna Kishore has written that if elite universities have a fixed number of seats and for students, and how do you think the attitude is going to change? I just have to quickly tell you, Mr. Kishore, that this is already changing. Almost all the top universities are not looking at children with rote learning or only the scorecard, so to speak. They are looking at the entire portfolio. And with the National Education Policy 2020, this is changing in a major way within India as well. So yes, there is some hope there. And we are left with very limited time, just about 4 minutes. So very quickly, Mr. Stephen Cox and Abhimanyu, if you could share, one key aspect that we've so far missed, but I'll ask the same question and I would request one after the other, both of you can share. Teachers. No school is better than its teachers. And they are central. They are the ones, we call them facilitators, or we call them directresses of learning, or we call them learners today themselves. They are central. How can we ensure that this same culture of building and complete support for teachers? Stephen, you could start.
Yes, thank you. I guess I'll keep this brief, knowing that we have a couple of minutes and I don't want to to take all the time. I think, yes, and so teachers, and you mentioned facilitators of learning. I think I'm moving into more of a role in the future where teachers are activators of learning, where there'll be this partnership between teacher, student, and technology, and we will move towards this hybrid model of learning where some students will be able to learn online more. But ultimately, for teachers, I think it's about building. We talked about earlier about taking a risk. I think we have to build a net for teachers to fail. So when they do fail, they're able to bounce back up. So I'm a strong believer in coaching programs within schools to support the development of teachers. I think teachers themselves need to have a look at and reflect on their own practice and think about their own mindset. If we're promoting growth mindset and skills and attributes that we're talking to students, teachers need to have those as well. And we can all learn and develop those. That's the good news. And I think also the role of technology is not going to replace a teacher, but ultimately a teacher's role is going to be much more, as I said, activating those core competency skills that students are going to need in the future. So I would say that, it's about being bold. It's about being collaborative. When was the last time you did something for the first time? Start to have that kind of mindset that, change is sometimes good and positive. And I think that's where we need to move to next.
Thank you, Mr. Stephen. Mr. Abhimanyu Basu, very quickly on the same idea.
So I feel that, teachers have a very key role in this whole process. And it's about giving them that sort of environment, which I did bring in my initial remarks. But, where, and also to look at their growth in terms of what they need in order to move forward in that sort of direction. Many of them, who are traditionally trained, they really do not understand the difference between a content-driven approach to a sort of concept-built approach. So whether we are spending that amount of time to do that is critical, because then only this transformation can happen, because they are your change makers at the ground level. I think another small aspect that I want to touch upon with everyone here, because that's the sort of buzz which I'm seeing. The number game is going to be on. I don't think the number game is going to go anywhere, but it is important for the parents to understand that there is a university for every child. They need to be realistically aspirational towards some aspect. I feel that's a bigger problem, because that turns on unexpected expectations from the students, which turns on that sort of culture, what Brian was talking about in a certain extent. And the right thing to then say is probably this is not the school that can fulfill that type of aspiration. But how many of us would have that courage to do that, right? So I feel it's a partnership where everyone needs to realize their goals and expectations, because at the end of the day, the universities will have to have some benchmarks. Whether it's too qualitative or whether it's a mix of qualitative or quantitative, there will be some sort of benchmark which will define that. But then as long as you understand that there is somewhere for every child to go where they will fulfill their stuff, and every child moves at their own pace, would help everyone reach their goals rather than being unexpectedly sort of aspirational.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Basu. Very key point raised, and I think it has been an energizing, enriching discussion. Some of the key ideas, the idea of school culture being central has been there right through, and many, many more ideas have been discussed here, which are very key to building or talking about building a genuine culture which will have our children be help our children be future ready. So thank you so much, everyone. Over to you, Abhishek. Apologies if we have crossed a minute of the time.
No, ma'am. Thank you, Amrita, ma'am, for wonderful moderating this session. We have many more questions, ma'am. We have almost like 31 questions are there. So I will send all these questions to the panelists, and I also request audience to follow our speakers on their social handle as well. They are pretty much active on their social handle. And if you want to take the question offline, you can just ping him on their social handle. They will revert you as soon. And I request Deepak to hand over the speaker certificate to our esteemed panelists. And this is a small token of appreciation from the WS side. Speaker certificate is presented to Dr. Amrita Vohra, Director Education, GEMS Education. Thanks, Amrita ma'am. Thank you very much for joining. And the speaker certificate is presented to Stephen Cox, Chief Education Officer, New Nordic School, Finland. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for giving your precious time to us. And speaker certificate is presented to Mr. Abhimanyu Basu, Dean of Academics, Dhirubhai Ambani International School, Mumbai. Thank you, Abhimanyu, sir. Thank you for giving your precious time to us. Speaker certificate is presented to Mr. Brian Cooklin, Managing Director, North Anglia Education. Thank you, Brian, sir. Thank you for giving your time to 18th World Education. Speaker certificate is presented to Mr. Raghav Podar, Chairman, the Podar Education Group. Thank you, Raghav, sir. Thank you for giving your precious time to us. And sabhi ko namaskar. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you once again, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.